music, dance, theater. It's time to take a seat on the aisle with Tom Alvarez. Hear from performers, producers, presenters, and creators who enrich our lives in the performing arts. Who's on stage? Here is Tom Alvarez to introduce you.
We're going to take a trip right now. Like we always do about this time.
This is a journey into sound. Break it down.
Welcome to On the Aisle with yours truly, Tom Alvarez. My guest today is Kyle Long, one of Central Indiana's most influential and respected broadcasters. Kyle is the producer-host of Cultural Manifesto, producer-writer of Echoes of Indiana, and creator of both programs, which air on WFYI-FM, the PBS affiliate in Indianapolis. A major supporter of the performing arts, Kyle has made a significant contribution in spreading the word about the importance of the arts to the quality of life in Central Indiana and beyond. The music we've been listening to is the theme for Cultural Manifesto, hosted by Kyle Long, and he's right here in the studio with me. So, Kyle, I'm so happy to have you as a guest.
I appreciate it. Thank you.
You know,
Tom.
when I mentioned that, turnaround was fair play, and what I meant by that is you had me as a guest on your show at FYI back in August 18th, 2022, and I wrote about you in my column on the Iowa Tom Alvarez on my website on September 19, 2022. And at that time, I waxed about how impressed I was with you as a broadcaster, the fact that you did your homework and that you were so respectful for your guests. So tell me about the history of Cultural Manifesto. When did it start?
Sure. It started as a print column in Nouveau Newsweekly, which some folks might remember. It's still in existence, but just in digital form. But it was a weekly alternative newspaper that had a long life in Indianapolis. And I started writing this weekly column for Nouveau around 2012. And the editor-in-chief of Nouveau at that time was a man named Ed Wank, who had had a long career in radio prior to coming to Nouveau. In addition to writing these weekly columns, I was also creating a podcast that would accompany them on the website. And I would often, I'm a DJ as well, like in nightclubs, a nightclub DJ. So some of these podcasts would be mixes of the music of the artists I was interviewing. But I was just I love voices. I love the way people communicate. And I was interviewing such interesting people. I remember the Creole musician Buckwheat Zydeco or Albert Mazabuco from Ladysmith Black Mambazo, people with these really rich voices. So I started just chopping up these interviews and mixing them in with the music mixes I was doing. So they became kind of like, they were more than mixes. They became like interview programs with music weaving in and out. And Ed Wank, and I was doing all this on my cell phone. There was no, I didn't have the nice setup you have here. So it was very primitive and it sounded like trash. But Ed Wank, who was the editor at Nouveau at the time, heard something in those interviews that he thought could be improved and could maybe be suitable for radio. So he introduced me to the folks at WFYI, and that was about 10 years ago. So I've been at WFYI now for 10 years, producing and hosting Cultural Manifesto.
What was your first show?
My first show, actually, it's funny because now I'm also known for a program I produce called Echoes of Indiana Avenue. And a lot of my work as a music journalist has been devoted to studying Indiana's music history, particularly in the Indiana Avenue neighborhood. So my first guests on that inaugural edition were Robert Montgomery, the son of Wes Montgomery, and Zev Feldman, who was a jazz producer who had released a series of Wes Montgomery LPs. So it had that Indiana Avenue connection right away. And I also interviewed DJ Danger, who was a legendary Jamaican nightclub DJ, and he was there with Indiana Jones. And they had done the reggae nights at the Casbah on Sunday in Broad Ripple. So, right away I was touching on the things I'm known for. Indiana music history, and also the music of the immigrant community here in the state, which I've also devoted a lot of my work as a journalist to researching the history of that music and also the present day manifestations of immigrant music culture.
Well, this podcast, I cover the performing arts, music, theater, and dance. And certainly you could talk about music on your show, but you also talk to creatives from all the disciplines, do you not?
Yeah, I do. It is music-based, cultural manifesto, but it does bleed into other areas. And, I currently produce a segment called Rebel Music with Carla Lopez Owens. And she's an attorney, and she's known as an activist and someone on the fringes of the political culture here. And I wanted to do a segment kind of studying the relationship between music and activism. And I invited her to host this. And we've had on, politicians, writers, novelists. So I'm just interested in I'm interested in all the arts with a focus on music, but I'm just interested in the way that music affects people's lives and their experiences with music, and more so than just reviewing albums or, you know what I mean? Like that traditional music. When I started at Nuvo, they're like, review an album. And I'm like, well, I don't want to say bad things about these artists in our community. So I just was thinking more creatively about the ways music touches people and how I, as a music journalist, can kind of focus on that aspect of it.
So the arrangement changed most recently up to the time they hired you, right? You're now an employee of the station.
I am. Yeah, I was a freelancer.
Were you there on a volunteer basis?
Kind of. I mean, you could say that. That's a kind way of putting it. No, I mean, they would have been insane to hire me right out of the gate. I had no background in radio. So, they gave me a little trial period, and I earned my way to where I am today. But yeah, I did work there on a volunteer basis.
So are you living your dream, would you say?
I suppose I am. I think maybe you can relate to this. I think, especially in the media, it's such a grind, and you're just always like, you have tunnel vision on what the next program you have to get on the air is. So, I don't often stop and think about it, but absolutely, I didn't have, I would never have thought I'd be here at Wish TV, talking to a legendary journalist like you about music and culture.
Thank you for that. But, we have so much in common. And I really would encourage people to look for the story I did on you and they look at the piece that you did on me, because we discovered we're both come from blue-collar families and very modest backgrounds, and yet I had no training in broadcasting. I came from theater, and I didn't even finish my education, nor did you. So do you call yourself self-made?
I guess I am, but I don't think about it in those terms because I learned so much from people along the way.
Me too.
Our mutual friend, Artur Silva, who's a visual artist here in the city, I had a long collaboration with him, and he really showed me the ropes of how to survive in the world of the arts in general. Obviously, he's a visual artist, and I'm a DJ, music journalist, but some of those same principles overlap in terms of getting work, promoting yourself. And he really gave me a PhD education in how to survive as an artist. And then at Nuvo, I had a very thoughtful and supportive editor named Kat Copeland, and I learned a great deal from her as well. Now at WFYI, I have folks there that the late Jill Dittmeyer was very supportive of me, and I just soaked up all the feedback she gave me. She had a way of giving me really useful feedback in a gentle way that I could immediately apply to what I was doing. So in some ways, I arrived where I am today through a very unorthodox path, but a lot of doors were open for me, and I got a lot of education from people who didn't need to take that time to show me how to do what I was doing.
Again, your experiences reflect my own, and it takes a team, a village, to help people like you and me who come from very modest backgrounds to be able to. But I'd like to think it's another thing we have in common is I could talk to you for days, and I'm sure people have told you that. I'm not the only one, because you're so you can really see your curiosity. And like I said before, one of the reasons I respect you so much is the way you treat your guests. And you can tell they're always. I could tell oftentimes, and I've had the same situation. People come into the studio. The power of the medium is such that people are still intimidated by it. About. And there's this whole glamour and myth around the media, TV and radio, and so it can be a bit unsettling. But if you have the skill to make someone feel comfortable, and they're more willing to open up to you. So I think it's really cool when I listen to your guests, and they in the beginning sound guarded, but within like 10 minutes, you've got them opening up to you and sharing their lives in deep, meaningful ways. Is that intentional?
I hope. I mean, that's what you hope for, right? And certainly it's my intent to do the best job I can. And I would credit that to the amount of, number one, interest I have in everybody I speak to. I wouldn't invite someone to do an interview if I wasn't genuinely interested in what they do, but also the advanced research that goes into it. People respect that and they get excited about it. And what's really interesting is when you're sharing things with people that sometimes not only they may have forgotten, but they really didn't know. They really didn't know the ways their work, they really didn't know the ways their work had circulated, and they really didn't understand the impact of what they did. So, when I interview musicians, I tell them, did you know your song was sampled in this rap track? Did you know your record now sells for $4,000? So that's exciting for people. And it really changes the dynamic when you're able to kind of show them a side of what they've done that maybe they didn't know about. So yeah, it's the research.
You can hear the gratitude in their voices, over the airways when you pay homage to them the way you do. And you do it in a way that's it's not gushing. It's you always honor them. And I especially love the way you talk to seniors in particular. And, you always get the impression oftentimes that they think they've been forgotten. And you bring back all of these memories, and then they begin to share all of these wonderful memories that no one seems to have remembered or cared much about, and they get to relive all that. And that's one of the reasons I love it. It's got a real documentary feel to it. And
I hope so.
I used to produce documentaries, so I love history, and to see those interviewees of yours have the opportunity to talk about their careers and their work. The other thing that I appreciate is that, you know how musicians tick, do you not? And where does that come from?
Yeah, well, I'm on the, some people might not consider this to be in the sphere of music, but I think I'm kind of on the periphery of being a musician as a DJ, because a lot of the principles that traditional musicians use, we use in our work, pitch, time, tempo, meter, beat. We're working in music in a way, DJs, club DJs. So I think that does give me, and we're performers too, in a sense. I'm not much of a performer as a DJ, but I think that gives me some insight into it. And I also, had my time playing saxophone and guitar as a teenager. So I have some rudimentary understanding of music so that I can bring to these interviews.
So you were like a music nerd from the very beginning?
Yeah. I'm sure my mom had a lot to do with that, because I inherited her record collection when she passed, and I could see my DNA in her record collection, She had Bob Dylan albums, Thelonious Monk albums. She had Charlie. I don't know if anyone remembers Charlie Bird. He was an American jazz guitarist who specialized in Brazilian bossa nova music. So that was just like I said, it was like a piece of my DNA in her record collection. So I started collecting records when I was very young. I grew up at a time when people were just throwing records out on the street with the garbage. And literally, I would pull records out of garbage cans and take them home. And we lived in this terrible, horrible trailer park in a rural suburb of Indianapolis. And it was a tiny home. And I had 2 siblings. And I developed this record collection that outgrew our trailer. And my mom was very tolerant of this. She let me store records in our kitchen cabinets. It was a mess. It was a nightmare for her. But she tolerated my obsession with music and collecting records.
You talked in detail about your beloved mother in the interview that you did with me, but tell our listeners a bit more about her and how special she was to you. in terms of what you've done with your life?
Yeah, well, when I was like a troubled teenager, which I think most of us were at one point, she had a lot of understanding for that and granted me a lot of independence and freedom. I ultimately did not finish high school, and she never was hateful towards me because of that. She never punished me for that. She allowed me the time and space to figure something out for myself. And that's really what I'm most grateful for. I also had a sister, a younger sister, who was an incredible influence on me. We had very different music tastes at one point, and she opened my mind to a lot of things that I had shut off. And she started practicing music journalism when she was 13 or 14 years old. She created what we refer to today as a zine, which is like a photocopied, like a grassroots sort of magazine. And she was interviewing international rock stars like Oasis and Blur, these huge British rock bands in the 1990s, just on this little photocopy zine she did with her friend. So through her, I could see how if you put some imagination and work into it, you can do anything. I mean, we were living in squalor, and she was interviewing these major rock stars. So she opened my mind to a lot of things musically. And her and my mother, I wouldn't be here today without their
Well, I know you
influence.
to be a survivor because there's some tragedy involved. Tell me about that.
Sure. My sister, you know, she developed a drug problem, an addiction problem, and it ultimately led to her hospitalization at a young age. And my mother and I would stay at the hospital and care for her. And my mother passed away one night during this process of caring for my sister. And then just not much time had passed after that, and my sister passed away. And this was really the anchor of my universe, these two people. And I was fairly young at the time myself. I was around 29, or I don't remember exactly how old I was. So that was really a point where, overcoming that tragedy, I had to reinvent myself. And it allowed me the opportunity to kind of pursue the things that I'm now doing today. I immediately got involved in DJing not long after that. So that really, it was tragic, but it allowed me an opportunity to kind of, it allowed me a rebirth in a way. And I don't know why that is exactly. I don't know why I wasn't doing those things before, but it broke down something inside me.
Well, I consider you not only to be a gifted journalist, but I consider you to be an artist as well. And because of that, you know, it's been my experience that many artists, most artists, you know, turn tragedy into positivity and make a big contribution using that experience. Would you say that you did that? Turn that tragedy into being a positive force?
Sure, I hope so. And I think when you go through something, a personal tragedy where you lose people who are kind of the center of your life, I know people who become incapable of moving on, and they become obsessed with these people, and they maybe become bitter. But for me, it gave me a sense of fearlessness. I've survived something that I didn't think I could survive. So it was like these things that I was afraid to do, like go DJ at a nightclub. I was a very shy, withdrawn person. Mm-hmm. And the idea of getting in front of a room of 200 people at a nightclub and being the center of attention terrified me. Mm-hmm. But after surviving that, I was like, what do I have to lose at this point? You know, humiliation seems like nothing compared to the grief that I experienced in this, surviving this personal tragedy.
You know, considering your background and how you you turned your back on formal education. How did you educate yourself?
Well, maybe they turned their back on me. I don't know that I had any kind of master plan.
Actually,
you know what I mean?
Actually, that's often the case.
In the area where I grew up, it was a very classist culture, and I didn't strike them as someone who deserved higher education. So I kind of was one of those people that fell between the cracks, I guess. But it was through music. It's funny enough, collecting records, it ignited in me this interest in the world that wasn't there before. I loved music. And again, being able to walk into a thrift store and just rummage through this pile of trash and find records from Africa, Europe, it opened a whole new world for me. And eventually that led to me hanging out at Indian, Mexican grocery stores out on the west side of Indianapolis and buying dollar tapes that they would have next to the cash register. And that developed a whole new interest. So my education about the world was all through my interest in music and going out and researching music and finding these tapes and records at stores around the city.
And did you not tell me you spent a lot
of
of time at the library?
Yes.
Yeah.
I remember one year I begged my mom to buy a plaque card, and people probably don't know what that is. We lived in Hendricks County, and a plaque card is what grants you the ability to check out books at a library outside of your county, because you couldn't get a Marion County library card. My dream was to get a library card for Central Library as a teenager. And yeah, I would check out the maximum number of books, records, videotapes. And I thought I was rich when I had that plaque card. It was like I'd won the lottery, because I could now access this wealth of material at Central Library in downtown Indianapolis.
What did you do to support yourself before you became a DJ?
Sure. So I'd sold records. That was one of the things. The internet was booming at that time, and I would sell rare records. But I also worked at a grocery store in the night shift for almost 10 years. And that was an education too, just learning how to connect and relate to people who were very different from me, that we had different values, different political beliefs. So I learned so much working with those folks.
Where did that comfort with folks considered marginalized, where did that come from? You mentioned you went to Mexican and Indian stores, and sounds like you were pretty comfortable wherever you were.
Just not fitting in the world I grew up in. I didn't have a place in for whatever reason. Like I said, I could say it's maybe a class issue. I don't know what it was, but I just was never accepted amongst my peers as a child. And this Avon at the time is where we were living. And I think that just gave me empathy for other people who may not feel a place in the culture they exist in. So I would credit it to that. And also I found that, through music, I could connect with anyone. And that spark of joy, for instance, I worked at a gas station for a while, and one of my coworkers was from Pakistan. And on our breaks, I would ask her very meekly, because I was even scared to approach her, because I was so shy at the time. I would ask her about Nusrat Fateh Ali Khan or these famous Pakistani singers. And the joy that overcame people when you would mention something that was dear to them, that they had to keep hidden in this culture and society that we live in.
Pot.
Yeah. That spark of joy really encouraged me to use music as a way to connect with people. And it's something I did in my DJ work. That's why I gravitated towards DJing Asian music, Latin music, because that intercultural connection and the joy that it brings people to feel seen and to experience their music and culture with others from outside that tradition. I think that's how people develop a sense of home and for where they live when they felt alienated before. So, yeah.
I believe I told you that I'm now living in Hallville, and I've lived all over Indianapolis during my 45, 50 years here. And yet I never felt the same as I did growing up in a very diverse neighborhood in Fort Wayne, where I'm from. And, I'm surrounded by primarily Latino immigrants. And the immigrants, in my view, have really changed the fabric of our city for the better. I finally feel like I live in a world-class city. What do you think?
Well, I love Hallville. I think I'm fascinated by the neighborhood's history and what it is today. And it is that kind of big city neighborhood. It was for many years populated by Slovenian immigrants. And then the neighborhood began to diversify in the mid to late 20th century.
But the city in general, to see all of these different colors of faces and languages now in Indianapolis, don't
Absolutely.
you agree that we
100%.
have the fabric that I speak of?
Yes.
It has blossomed, do you not?
Oh, absolutely. And that's very present in the music scene today. And I've had to amend this. People often ask me as a music journalist, what's next for Indiana? What's on the horizon for music in Indiana? And I used to say, in the future, immigrant music culture is going to be what we're known for. And now I have to say, that's what we're known for now. Yeah. The biggest act to come out of Indiana, one of the biggest acts to come out of Indiana in the last few years is Omar Apollo. He's from Hobart, Indiana, raised by Mexican-American immigrants. He's a huge star. So yes, Indianapolis has changed. Indiana has changed. And it's brought so much life and vibrancy to our arts and culture.
What are some of these music scenes that you're referring to?
Right. Here in Indianapolis, we have so much diversity in the music scene. If you go out to Lafayette Road, near the old Lafayette Square, right? In the abandoned strip malls and the Kmarts and Targets from the past, they've opened huge dance halls. And some of the biggest acts in Latin America perform at these clubs. You know, salsa, I've seen Grupo Niche, the Colombian salsa group. I saw Los Tigres del Norte, the famous North in Mexico norteño group, play at an old Value City furniture store. I saw them play there about 10 years ago. The last time they came to Indianapolis, they were at the Field House. But that shows you the magnitude of the artists that are playing over there. There's also West African music in that neighborhood as well. So yeah,
there's a big Sikh community here. Do they have a music scene?
They do.
The Indians?
Yeah. And that's something I was part of for many years. I brought one of the most famous Punjabi artists in the world to Indianapolis, Punjabi MC, a few years back, and we did a show together. So yeah, the South Asian community has a huge music scene here, both classical and pop music.
How about the country scene?
You know what? Historically, Indiana had an extraordinary country music scene, and it's still here to some extent, but not like it once was. There used to be like a honky-tonk bar on every corner in Indianapolis. But yeah, I think that's also growing as well. Yeah.
Rock and roll.
Yeah, it's still here. Go to Fountain Square. There's rock bands everywhere.
The different kind of rock and roll. I mean, you know, different pop as opposed to retro. Or I mean, you know, is it broad?
It's broad. Yeah. There's definitely. I mean, Joyful Noise Recordings is based here in Indianapolis. One of the most successful independent rock music and experimental music record labels. So definitely, there's a lot.
Do you
going
have
on.
a favorite music?
I mean, it changes by the second. Yeah. There are artists that I would go back to all the time, but yeah, it changes all the time.
That for me is an impossible question to answer when people ask, what's your favorite film? What's your favorite musical? What's your favorite whatever, you know?
I like hearing new things. And that's my favorite thing, to hear something new that's exciting and that, you know, captures my interest and excitement.
And do you like musicals, musical theater?
Oh, yeah, I love musicals, classic musicals. I love the classic Broadway musicals, absolutely.
Do you get a chance to see...
Kurt Weill is one of my heroes. I don't know if he counts as music in the world of musicals, but he did a few.
Threepenny Opera.
Right. Yeah, he's kind of a hybrid of opera and Broadway.
Have you, how often do you see live music acts?
You know, since the pandemic...
Is that part of your job?
Yeah, since the pandemic, not as much as I used to. But yeah, I used to be in clubs all the time. But yeah, there's so much to do here now compared to when I was coming up.
spent your time at the Jazz Kitchen, right?
Yeah, I used to play there all the time. We did a big Brazilian carnival there. I did that with Artur Silva, playing Brazilian music all night long, and with dancers and samba drummers. So I've worked a lot at the Jazz Kitchen as a DJ.
Well, you know, the guests who preceded you, I'm sure you've met Danny Duarte for the IU classical music guitarist from Brazil. We spent a lot of time talking about the Bossa Nova concert he did with the Indianapolis Symphony Orchestra.
Yeah, that's amazing.
And I tagged Arturo on the post about my podcast.
Great.
What do you love about Brazilian music?
Oh my God. To me, it's like Brazil and America were like separated at birth. There's so much commonality in the music. What really got me into Brazilian music initially were the Tropicalia artists. This was an arts and culture movement that blossomed in Brazil in the late 1960s. They were reacting to the military dictatorship that ruled the country at the time, and they were being influenced by the Beatles and James Brown and all these American and British groups. And they created this music that was psychedelic. It was funky. It was like a mix of everything that I loved. And that was the gateway to the world of Brazilian music for me. Artists like Jorge Ben, Caetano Veloso. And yeah, then getting into the classic bossa nova music and samba. I love old school Brazilian samba music.
Gilberto, who we just lost last week.
I mean, we've lost a lot of Brazilian music icons.
Wasn't that a Stan Getz album that she
Yeah, and she was not really... she's not well regarded by a lot of Brazilian people. She kind of had her career in the U.S. and Japan, but Elsa Suarez died recently, who's an extraordinary bossa nova and samba singer.
Are you
Gal
a fan
Costa
of
died
Stacey
recently.
Kent's?
Who's that?
Stacey Kent's the jazz singer.
I'm not
She's
familiar with her.
recorded frequently in Brazil is
Okay,
widely
I'll
known
check it
there.
out. Yeah.
She's appeared here several times.
Okay.
In concerts at the Palladium and also at the Cabaret. She's got an album, it's all the Brazilian music, and she often performs, and she speaks Portuguese, and and performs in Brazil quite a bit. She's actually quite well known.
Yeah.
So how about Latino music? What do you like about Latino music?
Well, what got me
that's
into
broad
yeah,
too.
Yeah.
I mean,
what got me into that was Tito Puente, hearing his music for the first time, and it had this kind of aggressive swing to it. It's this pounding rhythm, and it was very much like the rap and heavy metal music I grew up listening to in terms of the intensity of it. And that's what got me into Latin music, just Tito Puente, and just becoming addicted to that big mambo sound and the energy of it. And they're like pounding the instruments with this violent force, like the great pianist Eddie Palmieri, just like pounding away at the keyboard. It was like punk rock. It was like metal. It was like rap music. It had that same kind of ferocious intensity to it. And from there, you get into all the micro genres throughout the continent of South America and Latin America. But Tito Puente was 100% the gateway for me into that world.
So tell me, within the last 10 years, you've had your share of guests, and I've listened to you most of the time you're on the air. I certainly can't keep track of all of the big names that you've had on, but you really have touched base with some of the most legendary musicians around. How do you produce?
That's a good question. Yeah, I always prioritize local music, and especially things that I deem historically significant. So I will bump a big celebrity interview I have a chance to do for an opportunity to interview a local musician who I've been, researching or hunting down for years. So yeah, there is a balance though, but you have to keep people interested in what you're doing. And if I'm just constantly interviewing people they don't know about, I suppose that would get a bit old quickly. So you do want to strike a balance. I'm always looking for balance in terms of production, balance of genre, balance of perspectives, and mixing the unknown with the known. And hopefully, people, you can sort of hope that a broad audience will maybe you'll stay in their mind to some degree.
Do you engineer your own shows?
I pretty much do it all from top to bottom, which is a lot of work. It's a lot of work producing this stuff. So yeah.
And what do you like about editing?
You have a lot of control as an editor. You can make people sound really eloquent, or you can leave in all their imperfections and make them sound less than perfect. But I love building the narrative. And through editing, you can do that. Maybe you can create a narrative where there wasn't one before. You can really polish someone's story as an editor and hopefully make it really gripping to listen to, I hope.
Do you love the power you hold to create and follow your vision?
I don't even think about what I do in that way. It's just like I have tunnel vision on the deadlines, and I know that, my manager at WFYI is waiting for me to turn in some paperwork right now. And I'm trying to balance that with getting all these things done. So you're just kind of tearing through it so quick. I don't even sometimes think about that.
Yeah.
When I talk to people who listen to the show, that kind of humbles me in that way to know that, hey, this thing that I'm at home editing till 3 a.m., somebody actually heard that and it meant something to them. And that's the whole point of it.
I've come to know you on a personal basis, and I know this to be true, that you were in fact quite humble. And so how do you manage to stay grounded? Because there is and I don't mean this in a pejorative manner, you are a celebrity, a local celebrity, and, it comes with the territory. You're going to get attention. So how do you accept that? How do you respond to it or deal with it?
Yeah, I'm such an introvert, and I don't know that I deal with any of it. Just randomly people might come up to me and want to talk. But it's always about something they heard, which I like. It's something that they heard that I put on the air, touch them in some way. But, why do I stay humble? If you don't stay humble in this field of work, you're a fool. Because if there's one thing I've learned being a writer or a journalist, I could walk back to the station after this and get my walking papers, This is a volatile world in the media. And a new editor can come in and just say, I don't like what this guy does. See you later. So if you're not humble doing this work, I think you're in for an awakening.
Essentially, then, how do you see your role as a communicator in general?
As a communicator, meaning
And just a communicator, because what you do, you're a communicator. You're
Sure.
communicating with music.
Yeah, no, I think I understand what you
There's a
mean.
through line that runs
Yeah.
through all your interests, are there not?
There is, and I try to be true. I was talking about the power an editor has to shape a narrative, and what I try to do is really listen to the artists or the individual's vision that I'm interviewing. I want to understand their vision and try to craft that narrative around their vision. So in terms of the communication side of it, I really want it to be true to what the artist is all about and not insert my own views and editorial ideas into the subject matter. So I hope I'm true to them. And again, sometimes through my research, I find out things about them they don't know. And I want to bring that to it as well and help them maybe expand their vision too. I think doing these interviews, it can be a two-way street. I can learn about you, you can learn about me, we can learn about the world, the listeners can learn about our worlds. And that's what I want to do, is facilitate this sort of kind of communal understanding of what we're doing here in this horrible, amazing world.
And as you said, if you don't have, because of your background or education, whatever, if you don't have exposure or there's an economic factor to be exposed to live performing arts, you have to depend on your television or your radio or now the internet, fortunately.
Yeah.
Things are changing so that even the poorest of the poor now have access.
That's what I love about radio.
To network
Yeah.
and like podcasts.
Yeah.
What do you think of the current media landscape?
Yeah.
And the fact that you're on a podcast?
Sure. Well, that's why I like working in public media. I've always aligned myself with publicly accessible platforms. We don't keep our content behind paywalls like the New York Times. We try to disseminate this to as many people as possible and remove all the barriers. I worked for about 10 years at Eskenazi Hospital, curating the Marian Tobias music program. Again, we're bringing music to people that might not be able to access it in other ways. Working at Nuvo, we were a free newspaper that was on every corner. I'm attracted to those sorts of platforms because I couldn't afford to get past those barriers of access when I was young. So I love working in public media because we try to make it as easy as possible for people to access what we're sharing.
At the risk of inserting myself in this.
No, go for it.
But we do share a lot in common, Kyle. Okay, let's go back to Eskenazi. That's where I first met you.
Is that right? Yeah.
I met you.
Oh, right. You were coming to
when
some of the
Marianne Tobias
APA
and your
or Marianne
colleague
Tobias
at FYI, Stolen Moments, Stephen Stolen.
That's right.
They were playing their annual Christmas, annual Christmas recital. They're in the lobby of the piano that she donated to the hospital. And that's where we met.
That's right.
And I'll never forget that. And
I met so many people there. That's what I miss about doing that job.
Yeah.
Is like everyone goes to the hospital, so you run into all stripes of people.
I had the opportunity of over many conversations with Marianne. She had a deep love for Eskenazi and for that program.
Yeah.
And the fact that that you were in that position tells me, well, I know that she respected you highly. What did you think about her passing?
I can't remember how old she was, but it certainly wasn't, a shock in terms of her age. But, I think of it in perspective with Crystal DeHaan's passing too, right? Here are these people who were extraordinary patrons of the arts for decades. They really lifted a lot of arts organizations and people up in this community. And I wonder, do we have that next generation of art patrons? I thank Marianne Tobias for giving me that opportunity to work in this music program under her name. It meant a lot to me, and it saddened me when she passed away, and I certainly respect everything she did in her life. She was also on the air at WFYI back in the day. I asked her about that once. There's a show called The Listening Room with Dick Rice, where they would review classical music records, and she would tear into all these classical music performances and give her candid opinion. But I do wonder, do we have that next generation of patrons here that are going to take up the crusade to keep arts alive?
Well, there'll never be another like her because, besides being an arts patron and a generous philanthropist, she was also a concert pianist.
Yeah.
Wrote the program notes, the ISO.
Right, of course, yeah.
She certainly educated me over the last 20, 25 years.
Devoted her life to music, and I love that.
And, she also loved musicians. She talked about how the ISO musicians. She had friendships with most of them, and even was mentors some of them. So, yeah, and, she also was a consultant on Dustin and my musical, Call to the Musical. So I can't tell you, there's nothing more intimidating to be sitting there playing your score and singing the lyrics and your musical, and she's sitting there judging you.
Yeah, that's what I'll remember most about her, was her incredibly high standards for quality and what should be presented and what should not be presented. And I think that might be missing in the arts landscape today to some degree. It can come off as intense to someone from my generation, because I didn't grow up around people who had those high standards, but it'll always stick with me, the high standards she had and exercised at all times.
She pulled no punches. That she didn't like something that she heard that Dustin playing on the piano, she'd say, fix it.
Yeah.
Fix that.
Yeah.
Fix that.
It'll stick with me. Yeah.
So, what are your observations regarding Indy's art scene, performing arts scene?
Yeah. And I mean, from what angle? There's so many ways to approach it.
Well, that statement itself tells me that it's like a universe of things going on. We're just, I'm hoping that this podcast will put a spotlight on Indianapolis in general.
Yeah.
Because I mean to have artists from all stripes on here to talk about their work. And just recently I talked to some creatives, both artistic directors of two theaters, American Lives and Catalyst Repertory. And they're sort of, and I call them Brian Fonseca's descendants, because they have the same sensibilities. And I said, well, what do you think about that notion that some people have, where they say things like, well, if you were any good, you would be in New York or Chicago or LA. And, they push back on that, as I do. They made the point that great art is being made here. Yeah. Just because it's not in those places doesn't mean that it's good. They may have a combination of more money, more marketing, more breaks, whatever. Yeah. What is your take on it?
Sure. So I think there's a lot of good and bad here, right? When I think of the good, I think of visual artists like Anila Aga, who's a brilliant genius who lives here in Indianapolis. Carl Pope also is a guy who I greatly admire.
Is
visual artist.
Carl still in town?
Yeah, I believe so.
I didn't know that.
Extraordinary man. Visionary artist.
I've got to see his work, and Steve still has. He's in the permanent collection of MoCA in New York, Museum of Modern Art, MoMA.
And
there
I don't know
a MoCA here.
I don't know if we always do a good job. And I want to take the media to task, people like me. I don't know if we always do a good job elevating those people. And I don't know if the local arts infrastructure supports them as much as they should. There's also a downside to the local arts culture, and I think that can be seen through the ongoing missteps at Newfields, to put it kindly, right?
Yeah, let's talk about that.
There is a lot. The kind of sentiments that were expressed at Newfields that resulted in international outrage are very common here. And the things that I hear firsthand from museums and arts institutions here that don't get publicized are worse than what came out at Newfields. So the problem here is deep. There is a lot of classism and racism and in this local arts community that I think the activists are trying to hammer that out and take it on.
So elitism is still alive.
Elitism is still alive and a lot of other isms that are infecting the arts
institutional
culture here.
racism.
Yeah, institutional.
Call it what it is.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. So there's a lot of good and bad here, but that's brought a lot of shame onto our city. What's gone on at Newfields? I mean, it's been in the New York Times and in all the arts publications.
Why do you think that there's so hush hush about it? What happened?
With what happened
it a personnel matter.
Recent, yeah. Well, I know a little bit of the inside story, and I think because it doesn't, no one looks good when the laundry is aired. No one's going to look good when they hear what happened. So,
well, there's a communications 101 about crisis management. PR people, they offer those services.
People also sign NDAs and can't talk about it too.
True.
So, I mean, there's a lot of things I think that it's not flattering for anyone.
And what's the rank and file person in the community? I mean, I've seen official spokespeople being interviewed on TV about Black leaders dropping off the committees and whatever, but what are the average people saying about it? African Americans.
Right. I mean, that depends. I mean, there were people protesting the Winter Lights display. So there is anger and frustration about what's happening. But there's also people who are glad to just go and continue blindly patronizing as well. I work with the institution. I have a long history working there as both a music curator and a DJ. And there was wonderful people there that are suffering because of the decisions that the executives there are making and their missteps. So I hope for everyone's sake that it's resolved in a way that's equitable.
I didn't realize that you were a music curator there. Tell me about that.
It was for a brief period of time.
Okay.
Yeah, but I was able to bring in some really extraordinary artists.
To the Toby?
To the Toby, or just out in the middle of the galleries at times. So just a real diverse range of artists. Laraji, who is he plays like a zither. He worked with Brian Eno. He's considered a father of ambient music. He's one of the few Black musicians who were involved in early ambient experimental electronic music. To Kominas, who are a punk band, a Pakistani punk band, which we brought into play for the opening of the Ai Weiwei show a few years back. So I was able to bring in a really interesting group of musicians to the city.
So you've done some unique partnerships. Have you partnered with the other museums like the Eiteljorg?
I brought a group called the Tribe Called Red to the Eiteljorg a couple of times, an incredible Canadian Native First Nations electronic music group. They mix traditional Canadian Indigenous music with electronic music. They're a groundbreaking group. So yeah, I've collaborated with a lot of institutions.
How about the Indiana State Museum? Indiana has a rich musical history.
Right. I have a little something going on with them, but I can't talk about it yet. But yeah, I've done some stuff with them as well. Yeah.
Okay. I mean, all of the knowledge you have about all of the composers, everybody from Cole Porter to Hoagy Carmichael and Jeanette Records. And I've learned so much from you, but in my own work, I also touched upon some of those things. So I have an appreciation like you do. But that tradition that Indiana, it runs deep, doesn't it?
Yeah. And I will tell you, I don't know if you heard the program I did on Brez Fletcher, but you got to check that out. I don't know if that's someone who's ever been on radio. He was the, Calvin Fletcher, he's looked at as one of the founders of Indiana. I believe that was his great uncle. So Brez, and have you been to Laurel Hall?
No.
Are you familiar with Laurel Hall?
I've heard
the mansion out on the northeast side of the city. That's where Brez Fletcher grew up.
Laurel Hall.
Yeah,
remind me.
It's a mansion. They do a lot of weddings there now, but it was built by the Fletcher family.
Okay.
Brez's father.
Yeah, I have
he grew
heard
up there. Yeah, you would know if you saw pictures.
So whatever happened to?
He was one of the pioneer LGBTQ plus songwriters in America. So check that show out. Yeah, from Indiana. Very tragic life. His mother committed suicide when he was a kid, and he ultimately killed himself.
See, that's another thing that I love about you. You find the most obscure stories.
Well, they're not obscure to me. That's all I can say.
I know that, but yeah. I love that. I love that about your work. So, whatever happened to you? You approached me to get a contact in my hometown, Fort Wayne, about the family that used to produce had their own label.
Right. That's an ongoing research project. Yeah. I have so many of those on the back burner. Like at any time, I have about 20 things. And that's one thing I don't think people realize when they listen to the radio show. Sometimes these are years in the making, the research, acquiring the materials. But yeah, the first Mexican music record label in Indiana was in Fort Wayne in the 1960s.
And it was
in this pioneering family.
Do you remember?
I'm blanking on it now.
Well, in the family I know, Trevino's.
Yeah, Trevino Records. Yeah, of course.
And I told you that one
of
the Trevino's was my mentor, responsible for me being in television. Yeah. So,
But they held big dances in that area back in the 60s. And
they had 4 or 5
on the radio.
Successful records, the family business. They were all involved in it. Back to the art museum discussion. Why is representation important from the standpoint of a straight white Caucasian like yourself?
Well, why, in terms of the arts and culture, Zane?
Yes.
Well, that's some of the most exciting work being made today is made by non-white artists. So why would we punish them? Why would we punish ourselves and not enjoy and experience what other people are creating? To me, it just doesn't make sense. Obviously, I mean, Indiana was the home of the Ku Klux Klan for many years. We have systemic racism here that influences things that are happening in local and state government today. So there's a lot of crazy things that got us where we are politically. right? But why would we do that to ourselves on a personal level? Why would I deprive myself of experiencing something extraordinary and beautiful because I don't understand the person who made it or have some bias against them? So I would only speak to that personally, but I think there's years of systemic racism in Indiana that have landed us where we're at today.
Well, do you think that also the idea of, can we truly call ourselves a world-class city if we're still keeping people oppressed?
Right, like the Mike Pence years, right? Yeah, I agree. And I don't, one thing I hope I never do in my show is lavish Indianapolis or Indiana in false praise. You know, I think we need to hold people accountable and be honest about what's happening here. Let's praise the people who do great things, but let's not cover up the horrendous decisions that are made that hurt people and that hold people back for no good reason.
What do you think in terms of the city and the state's desire to, make Indianapolis a cultural destination? Do you think we need to work out these bigger problems before we can really say that we're a true?
Sure. I mean, look how
destination?
look at how some of the recent legislation has affected the attitudes of corporations in investing in our city, right? I mean, sure, that's going to put a real wrench in the works. Absolutely. But Indianapolis is a cultural destination. I think we've done a lot of things to prevent that from happening. The destruction of Indiana Avenue is a good example. I think we have to control the forces of gentrification and really preserve what's special about our city until the whole place is just a bunch of Starbucks and crappy apartment buildings.
Well, along those lines, I interviewed for my column someone who was very instrumental in developing downtown, and this person, we had to talk about gentrification. He said, "Well, I don't agree that, gentrification, it's complicated."
Sure.
He said, if there's going to be blame placed, it should be placed on government, on the city and its policies.
Yeah.
Towards property taxes and all that sort of thing.
That's very true. Yeah.
And he says, but the downside is if we don't fix up these properties, they remain uninhabited, and then there's the problem of landlords, absentee landlords. But do you find yourself caught between the middle of all that,
I'm not in a position where I'm caught in it, but a lot of artists are, because the negative effects of gentrification, oftentimes these days,
artists can't live in Fountain Square anymore.
Well, artists are called on to put a Band-Aid on that through public art projects. So I think, and artists depend on that money to survive. So I think a lot of particularly visual artists, but some musicians also, are put in a position where they're kind of trying to put a Band-Aid on the negative effects of gentrification through public art projects. And there's a lot of arts organizations here who have profited mightily from gentrification and who will tell you that they're doing work for the benefit of the community, when really it's the bankers and the real estate brokers who are really benefiting from these projects. So it's very complicated. Like you said, a lot of it does have to do with property taxes and how people are priced out of the neighborhood they grew up in. Through the escalating property taxes as the value of homes increases. So I don't claim to have any answers for it, but I do see how gentrification, or urban renewal, as it was once called, can destroy cultural districts.
Well,
like
I mentioned earlier, Fountain Square is a
Yeah.
good example of that.
Yeah.
It used to be a mecca for artists who, the J.C. Penney building.
Yeah,
is
it was
no longer.
the Murphy Building. Yeah, artists are very scrappy, and I think they'll always find a place to create. But the city needs to do something to preserve those places, or we're just always starting from
Where
zero.
are the artists now, the visual artists? Where are they now? Is there a concentration now?
I mean, there's still studios in the Murphy Building. There's the Circle City Industrial
But there's
Complex.
not a neighborhood that's for poor, starving local artists.
I think
cheap
there's
rent.
some folks trying to do that in the Garfield Park area.
Yeah,
It's there.
Yeah. So what is your message? Do you have a message for young people listening?
Gosh, I just came from Carl Wilde Elementary School, where Babyface had donated a bunch of musical instruments, and there was a gymnasium full of 3rd, 4th, and 5th graders who were cheering Babyface on for this act of generosity and donating all this musical gear. There was something to learn there, but I don't know if I've processed it yet. But I would just say trust your internal voice and your vision, and don't let anyone stamp that out. You know, the only reason I've succeeded is because I followed this weird voice in my head that always told me to turn left where other people were turning right. And it allowed me to cultivate. I'm not a great broadcaster. I'm not a great producer, but I have a perspective that's unique that I bring to my work. And it's because I always just kind of, maybe I'm mentally ill or I'm stubborn, but I always listened to this voice in my head that entrusted it and stood my ground even when people thought what I did was foolish and worthless. It probably is foolish. And I think trust your voice and be true to that and don't conform to
it sounds like you've never allowed anyone to define you as well.
I mean, maybe I have, but I always revert back to my best or worst nature, whatever it is that's keeping me on this track.
Along those lines, what do you hope to accomplish in the long term through your work as a broadcaster?
You know, so
and
much
an arts advocate.
Yeah, so much of what I've done up to this point has been focused on Indiana music history. And I hope that I've made some dent and I hope I've been able to bring stories to life to people, develop greater appreciation and recognition for the music history we have here in Indiana. And up to this point, that's really been a big part of what I do.
Why is history important?
Why is history important? I mean, to me, I'm passionate about the art itself. So it's important to me for that reason. I don't think like Buzz Fletcher, this gentleman I mentioned, his name is not known here in Indianapolis, where he's from, but there's a lot to learn from his music. He wrote a song called It, that people consider the first song about a transgender, non-binary person. You know, there's a lot to learn from things that happened 100 years ago. You know, Leroy Carr, the blues singer from Indianapolis, who started recording in 1928 and drank himself to death. He died in 1935. His music, his collaborations with a guitarist named Scrapper Blackwell, are the foundation of modern rock and roll and rhythm and blues music. His songs have been performed by the Rolling Stones, Eric Clapton, the great blues singers Robert Johnson, Muddy Waters, Howlin' Wolf, all recorded his music. But people here don't know who Leroy Carr and Scrapper Blackwell are. So I'm passionate about the art. And to me, time is malleable. I don't view things past, future, present. To me, if something it's great, it's always great. If it's great for me this afternoon, it'll be great for somebody tomorrow.
Any chance your show will be syndicated?
Well, we just started airing Echoes and Cultural Manifesto on WBAA in Lafayette. And I do get this question, but it's so hyper-local. I just don't imagine people outside Indiana would care, but maybe I'm wrong.
Yeah, but you also have big names from national names too. So it's that mixture. It sounds like, it seems like it might be.
I worry if I tried to do something for national
even
consumption,
the local people
that it would dilute what's unique about what I do.
But all the people that you interview, the themes that usually emerge from those shows, the discussion is, it could be of interest to anybody, anywhere.
When you go on, how I view all this is when you go on that national level, you really have to be competitive. And you really have to paint with broad brush strokes. And I think I'm better where I'm at, kind of down in the dirt. That's where I like to be. And I don't want to have to worry about, is this demographic going to like it? And did we get this many clicks? And that's a world I don't want to live in.
And you know what? We all benefit from you, Kyle Long. I, for one, am very, very grateful that you are a presence on the local media landscape. And, I just really respect the integrity that you have. You do it your way and on your terms. And well, that speaks to, public radio as well, So I'm really grateful that I had you on my turf this time. And just as the time we spent together in your studio, I benefit greatly from it. So.
Thank you. And the work you've done and the work you're currently doing is like a torch for us to follow. So I don't mean to be patronizing by saying that, but, I really am influenced by the career you've had and how you continue to be part of the scene.
Great. Then we're a mutual admiration society.
For sure.
May it continue.
Yes.
Thanks again.
Thank you, Tom. Appreciate the opportunity.
Who will take center stage on the podcast next? Your seat on the aisle with Tom Alvarez awaits. Follow Tom on Facebook, Instagram, Twitter, and TikTok, and make sure to visit tomalvarez.studio. Watch Tom every other Thursday on Lifestyle Live on Wish TV, And make sure to listen every week here on the All Indiana Podcast Network.